All right, what's going on, everyone? LinkedIn Lives back to back this week. Kind of like it. It's kind of fun to do the lives again. I feel like just with life, the company, I've gotten away from doing as many lives. I actually got a special request to bring back the Friday morning Jake DJ party, which maybe I'll do. I don't know. That was a lot of fun. I enjoyed it. If you didn't ever watch, I did 140 I don't know if it's straight weekly recaps. It's a lot of weekly recaps, but maybe we should bring it back. Now, Jake and Friends is the longest standing show on maybe the longest standing show on LinkedIn, period. I was one of the first 80 people or something with LinkedIn Live. So should be a great conversation here. I'm very excited for my guest here, Nelson, to talk through. I've got LinkedIn pulled up over here. So if every once in a while you see me kind of peek over, that's what oh, no, calm down. So that's what I'm up to if you see me like looking to the side. So today we're going to talk about buyer-centric customer interactions. And, the interesting part about this idea is, if you think about most sales processes, right? Most sales processes are built from a seller or sales leader's desire to extract certain information about the process or whatever that might be. And so today we're going to go deep on what does it mean to actually to have a more buyer-centric process and go from there. So I'm excited. I'm going to bring up Nelson now, and we're going to chop it up for a little bit on what does it mean to be buyer-centric. And he wrote a book too about the death of the SDR. So I'm excited to talk through that.
All right. What's up, Jake? Hey, everyone.
And how are you, man?
Yeah, good. Good to be here.
Good, man. I'm good. I'm excited for the conversation. So I was just kind of teeing up the conversation here around the concept of buyer-centric selling. And I think when I think about this, what I feel like's happened is there was a world for a long time, for forever, we'll say before the last few years, where buyers had to come to a sales organization to get information. And so therefore the buyer, the customer would kind of put up with more crap, right? Like, yeah, you're going to hold back pricing. Yeah, I got to talk to 13 people before I can get like one answer on like, how much does this thing cost? Or even just like, can I get a demo for Christ's sake? So, with a lot of organizations, what we're seeing now is that, look, these old barriers, these old ways that we used to think about how we engage with people, et cetera, like this is changing. And so if you're as an organization, you're not thinking about how to stay ahead of the game, if you're not thinking about how to have a more customer-centric process, you're missing out 100%. So what I want to do here is I want to just kind of like dive in. And Nelson, first, maybe just tell everyone who doesn't know, and make sure, again, if you're joining us, feel free to drop some questions in the comments. We're talking about customer-centric buying. But Nelson, maybe you want to do a quick high level on you and what you're up to as well.
Yeah, sure. Hey, everyone. So Nelson Gilliat, author of The Death of the SDR and the Birth of Buyer-Centric Revenue. And basically, I challenged the predictable revenue model and proposed a new model called the buyer-centric revenue model. I also challenged quota and commission. So that's part of the model as well. We'll talk about that. Just a bit of history. I started off as an SDR and then escaped to sales as fast as I could. And then was in sales as an AE for a few years. And then basically I moved to another company. And then it was a small startup. So kind of wore all the hats, product marketing, demand gen, and also the sales role, but as an AE CSM combined.
Right.
And so that's kind of where a lot of my experience has been. And now I'm in marketing doing demand gen. So I've switched over to the other side of the aisle. Yeah.
All right. Well, good. So again, you've got a lot of frontline experience. You now have that kind of other side of the aisle experience. Why the switch to marketing? why was that like an interesting switch for you? I think a lot of sellers, not a lot, but I know some sellers certainly aspire to make that move. Why'd you make the move?
Yeah, and I think probably a lot of sellers enjoy wooing buyers in the door. That's trying to interest buyers, the top of funnel bit, taking people from like, 0 to the first step. And that's really an exciting part, almost like in dating, right? It's like the initial part. And so that was always the case for me. I always enjoyed that the most. And I thought once you do that really well, it tends to be the rest of the part is like you kind of go through the motions a bit. And it wasn't as exciting for me.
I got it. Got it. All right. And then you made the move over. So let's start with this idea of buyer-centric revenue. So talk to me a little bit about, obviously, we're seeing it too, a lot of the things you're talking about. But why did you write this book? Like, what was the concept around buyer-centric revenue model? And you know what I mean? Like, why did you feel compelled to put this out there?
Yeah. And I think another thing I'd add to what you asked before is that I felt like the sales role was really lousy. I felt like there was a lot of aspects to it that I really didn't enjoy. There were aspects that I did enjoy, but there were some things that really bothered me.
Like what?
And I think it's prospecting, the sales assembly line, or seller specialization, the AE-CSM split for starters, but then there's other subdivisions. So prospecting, the sales assembly line, quota, and commission, which are the 4 key aspects of my book and the buyer-centric revenue models, the things or the like outdated and harmful practices in sales I think ought to change if we're going to elevate and modernize sales, which to your point earlier about like things have changed and the modern internet and buyers are in control now, and yet we're still stuck in these outdated sales practices. I think those are the key practices today that are holding sellers back and causing less productive and fulfilling careers, and give sales the bad reputation that I think unfortunately is well earned, both amongst sellers and how sellers feel about being in sales, and amongst buyers as well.
All right, well, let's get into that, man, because I don't know. I don't know if I'm going to agree with everything, but we'll see. Because again, I do think, there's also a reason that salespeople make more money than anyone else in the company, right? And it's because the level of discomfort required warrants more pay. That if you're going to get uncomfortable, that, that's part of the game. That's part of what it is. Now, with that being said, there are a lot of things that I think are antiquated. So let's dive into this, and then we can go through it over and over again. So what is, like, when you say buyer-centric revenue model, like, give me like the top bullets here. Like, give me the things that you're like, this is what is buyer-centric. This is what is not.
Yeah, sure. So there's 4 key tenets. The first one is a marketing thing, which is proper marketing exclusively via demand generation to generate and qualify leads for sales. And so that sunsets prospecting and sales development. The second tenet is a real full sales cycle seller, bit of a mouthful, which is an AE-CSM combined and no prospecting. And that sunsets the sales assembly line, the AE-CSM split and other subdivisions like the sales engineer. So you have a complete full seller that handles the initial sale, expansion, retention. And then the third aspect is proper sales goals and performance measurement. And so that sunsets quota, and we can talk about what that looks like. And then the fourth thing is proper sales compensation of full OTE salary plus bonus. And that sunsets commission.
Okay. So let's kind of break this down. Okay. And again, like, we'll talk about predictable kind of revenue. And for a lot of you listening, feel free if you want. I've got the comments pulled up over here too. So if you want to drop a question in here, a comment, maybe you're like, I don't agree with any of this. Maybe you're like, I love this. Feel free to do so. So let's talk about the first part, which is demand gen, right? Which is the combination of outbound, inbound, everything around generating leads. I remember first hearing a story like what you're saying with HubSpot. HubSpot, I remember back 8 or 10 years ago, 9 years ago, and HubSpot said, we'll never do outbound. Nope, not going to do it, all inbound. And then guess what? They wanted to crack the enterprise. And so now I can't remember 30+% of their revenue comes from outbound. And so I think that, look, obviously they grew to be a good sized company, but then it could only accelerate growth to a certain point of, people at that where early majority or whatever curve who are searching for solutions versus creating a need. So how do you feel like we can move away from having any outbound, which I think is what you're getting at, which is that there's a world where you could scale an organization forever without outbound. And you can tell me if I'm wrong or I'm paraphrasing incorrectly as well.
Yeah, sure. So one of the, alleged arguments for quote unquote outbound, which is another way of saying prospecting, is that you need to do that in order to move up market and to woo bigger companies in the door. And I don't think that's the case. I don't think buyer preferences really change for how they want to be marketed to, depending on how many coworkers they have. And the way I define prospecting, like what those marketing tactics look like, is telemarketing, door knocking, email spam, LinkedIn spam, bribery via gift cards, and physical direct mail spam. And then demand gen is everything else: content, social media, events, community, partnerships, referral marketing, you name it, partner marketing, free trial or freemium to get free users in the door, community, whatnot. And we can talk a lot more about the specific type of tactics. But you can tailor any one of demand gen's tactics to woo buyers at bigger companies. You make that very clear in your messaging throughout all your tactics that you're helping big companies. You involve, buyers at big companies in your marketing, and so you invite them onto your podcast or, to co-create posts or something like that, or surveys and whatnot. Every time that you're talking about your company, you're constantly making it clear that that's who you guys help. And then there's just, in your ads, you can target, bigger companies in your ads. In your events, you can invite people from bigger companies. It's just like, there's so many different ways when you do proper marketing.
How are you inviting them, Nelson? Like, aren't you sending an email, like a marketing email?
Yeah.
That, might be spam. Like, you know what I mean? I guess it's like, how is inviting someone, or again, like a banner ad or something, like a retargeted ad, how is that any less spammy?
Yeah, so I don't consider like an invitation to a non-sales situation, like to co-create content, spam. I think that's welcomed by buyers, and that's appropriate. So if you're inviting someone to, come speak at an event, or to come join the podcast, or to weigh in on this, relevant piece that they're known for, I think that's very appropriate. But if you're trying to bug someone to speak to sales, that pitch slap, I think that's inappropriate. So it's not necessarily the medium of email that's inappropriate. It's how it's used and what it's used for. And I think in sales development or prospecting, it is specifically used for, hey, can you take a meeting with sales? And to the extent that that's not being done, that's really, there are a lot of folks in sales development or people who are doing prospecting who are trying to do demand gen. They're trying to do non-salesy stuff, but they're deliberately incentivized not to do that because they've got quotas and commissions, and given the constraints of the sales development role or whatnot. So they can't. And so there's some things that people say, hey, well, isn't this good about, that's a pretty good thing about prospecting. That's not so bad. And it's like, yeah, well, why isn't demand generation doing that? Why do you have these people in these roles doing it when they're deliberately incentivized and prevented from doing that? Given the way that they're measured and the way that they're paid and everything else, and all their activity quotas.
Yeah, but what if you get rid of activity quotas? What if you get rid of activity quotas, and instead, I had Vin Montano, we did a LinkedIn Live yesterday, and Vin, was talking about his, he gets a 77% open rate and an 18% reply rate because he customizes everything, right? It's like he customizes this, hey, I saw this thing on LinkedIn, or I saw this tweet that you had, and I'll send him a video just saying hey, I enjoyed the content, right? And then he's got a lot of touch points that are not their value add. They're saying, just like how marketing would say, hey, you're a VP of operations, you want to know about the future of logistics or something like that. Here's a quick high level on that. How is that not okay? And how can marketing possibly replicate that?
Yeah, sure. So if you took away activity quotas of hey, send X many emails, send X, make X many dials, plus you took away your short-term monthly meeting quotas, make 10, 15 meetings a month with sales, Plus you got rid of commission, which is roughly half of your salary pending your quota attainment. We'll talk about that. Then essentially you're not left with the SDR role anymore. What you're left with is a marketing role. And I think you can have a junior entry-level marketing role, a demand gen specialist, a marketing specialist, a marketing coordinator, that has none of those ills of sales development, but can help with sort of like, manual one-off emails that aren't sales pitch emails, or engaging a few select one-to-one people or something like that, in such a scenario, as well as helping with other stuff in marketing across, all the bits and pieces of marketing. But I think that there's, you're putting someone like that in a straitjacket if you put them in the sales development role, if you put them into the constraints of that, because they really can't pursue that to any meaningful extent, and have to do all the other bad junk as well. So,
all right. All right. I'm trying to think. I think it's an oversimplification of leaderships with bad behavior. Meaning, like, I get it. Like, I get the point. But I also, it's an evolution of the role versus a elimination of it. That, if you think about it, if you go back to, again, Aaron Ross, predictable revenue, the original SDR back in the mid 2000s, which is really when this role was kind of birthed, like, that person had a conversation with the client too. I think where it's gotten to today, where it's like an appointment, like, you're right, it is like very marketing. It's like you're just setting appointments. But I think we used to give, more flexibility to the role, right? And we used to give more, I guess, insights to the role, where people could have a conversation and could, like, answer valuable questions as well. And so I definitely agree that I think in terms of being buyer-centric, the way that the role, its current evolution is old. But I do wonder, again, going back to it, it's like, whether it lives in marketing or sales doesn't really matter, right? I think the point of what you're saying, and you can kind of correct me if I'm wrong, is that, like, customer engagement should be about value add, moving people to hand raisers versus trying to move people to hand raisers immediately. Is that a fair, like, oversimplification of it?
Yeah, I think given modern buyers and their preferences and modern marketing and modern sales, you can have demand gen do all these wonderful value added things to buyers, educate them, influence them, entertain them, build like real genuine relationships with them and community and your content through social and whatnot, make people excited about your brand, develop an affinity and all that type of stuff. So that buyers will raise their hand when they are ready and request to speak to sales on the website. Marketing or demand gen can automatically qualify them with a few questions. And then if they're qualified, they can book a time directly from the seller's calendar. And that is what you should be completely focused on. And what's happening now is that you have sort of mixtures in companies. They have elements of demand gen and sales development. They're both kind of competing for each other. And there really are two different types. They're just two different approaches to marketing. Prospecting is sort of an outdated marketing strategy from the pre-internet era. We can talk about how that originated and then how eventually that got to predictable revenue model. I think it's important that we talk about what the predictable revenue model is and what that meant for prospecting. And I think when people understand the historical context of this stuff, they tend to be like, oh, okay, I get it. And then I think we should also talk about how sales development is suffering today. And I think you had a post the other day from some data across 840 companies that only 18% of sales development teams are hitting quota and 53 or 58% are reporting that they're way off. And so sales development is not performing well today. And despite all the tools, technology, know-how, coaches, training, whatever, compensations, and so it's something that it's not in how it's done, and it's not that like we should do it differently. It's that the role has got to go, and we've got to help these folks who are already trying to get out of the role as fast as they can transition to more productive and fulfilling careers.
All right, so go ahead. Feel free. I mean, I can give my take on it, but you can feel free to go ahead and give me the high level on predictable revenue and why that model is antiquated.
Yeah, sure. So the predictable revenue model is the popular B2B marketing and sales model that was based on how Salesforce, or based on aspects of Salesforce marketing and sales efforts back in the early 2000s. So again, aspects of broader marketing sales efforts of Salesforce in the early 2000s. And so basically what it consists of is prospecting to be done full-time by sales development instead of part-time by sales, which is what it used to be. And then, so that's the marketing thing. And then the sales aspect was to have a sales assembly line. And so basically that was the AE CSM split, right? Someone to handle the initial sale, another person to handle expansion retention. And then in practice, obviously there's further subdivisions. And so essentially it codifies, it preserves, it fuels the existence of SDRs, AEs, and CSMs today. And Aaron Ross wrote, who was at Salesforce in the late 2000s, wrote a book in 2011, almost 10 years after his time there, called Predictable Revenue. And that's basically like what everyone is trying to copy to some extent today, a model that was 20 years ago, aspects of what Salesforce did 20 years ago. And it's even debatable then to what extent that was, given everything that was all the stuff that Salesforce was doing and what was possible within their means and ability and their knowledge, like to what extent did it actually contribute to their growth versus take away from it, et cetera, this could probably be debated. But it is essentially harmful because it is misaligned with modern buyers, modern marketing, and modern sales, which creates a lousy buying experience across marketing and sales. And it also creates lousy marketing and sales, which means less productive and fulfilling careers for people in marketing and sales, and particularly for sales development. And it creates, or I would say, suboptimal growth, or it harms growth. Growth is less, it's slower, it's harder, and it requires more money. And so it's a bad growth playbook. And then it wastes VCs money. So money that could otherwise be deployed more productively across their portfolio is misspent or malinvested. So that's why I challenge it. I think it is the core problem within B2B marketing and sales today. And that's why I call it the straitjacket. I think the bigger of the two problems is prospecting and sunsetting prospecting in favor of demand gen, and then the sales assembly line. And then aside from predictable revenue, I think quota and commission, which have been around a lot longer, are very problematic. But I don't want people to be confused. That's not a predictable revenue thing. That's just been a sales thing for some time. But I'll pause there.
Yeah. All right. So let's jump into it. So Russell Lott had a good question. Is like, do you think that prospecting is just a terrible way of marketing, or that marketing is just responsible for sale? Or it's just an extension of sales?
Yeah. So it's really helpful for folks to understand prospecting is a type of marketing and not sales. And I think it's really important now to actually touch upon the very brief history of prospecting. And it makes a lot of sense once we understand that. So prospecting originated in the pre-internet era, when marketing lacked as much ability to educate buyers and connect buyers with sales. There was print and, whatnot, and flyers and trade shows. Wasn't brilliant. And so marketing struggled to bring buyers to sales. So the idea was, or the marketing strategy was, let's bring sales to buyers. And so at first it started with, field marketing, where sales would go out and door knock, and that was outside sales or field sales. And then that kind of evolved into, digital door knocking, which was telemarketing, and that was inside sales. And so you can kind of think of prospecting as sales operating in the absence of marketing. And
not necessarily. They're not mutually exclusive. Most of the time there is a parallel path, right? It's not that lots of SDR teams are following up on intent-based, somebody did XYZ. There's the other side. It's and I won't define intent as someone downloaded something or, attended a webinar. But I do think they do run in parallel. It's not like if it's someone's prospecting, they're not also being marketed to.
Yeah. And so I'll come back to the history just to address lead scoring and lead intent, because that's actually what it is. And so what happens today is, again, it's this mixture where it's we'll have demand gen, do a whole bunch of good stuff and make buyers aware, and then we'll have sales development push them into sales. And so basically that's what lead scoring and lead intent is. It is based on the assumption of how likely a buyer is to request to speak to sales, based on a buyer's engagement with demand generation's content, events, whatever. They're downloading content, they're attending events, they came to webinar, they're visiting the website, or they hit up the review site. and they assign these buyers some sort of points, and then that gives a way for the SDRs to sort of prioritize which MQLs, which I define as the contact information of an uninterested buyer. It helps SDRs triage which of those MQLs they should prioritize annoying. And so what happens is when you do that is SDRs will turn off a whole lot of buyers, and that they will push some buyers prematurely into sales that would have come in anyways when they were ready. And so these buyers who, they'll come in early to sales, they're not that ready yet, but maybe they couldn't say no to the SDR, which happens a lot, and they're just kicking the tires, they're just browsing, they're not really, they're like, okay, fine, I'll take it, even though they should be able to get a lot of this information on the website. But unfortunately, a lot of demand gen teams are prevented from putting that information on the website to begin with. And so they waste sales' time. And so sales kind of get stuck with these premature buyers that aren't as likely to buy as fast. And so lower win rates, lower sales cycles, higher CAC, sales inefficiency, whatnot. And so, there's
Nelson,
yeah.
People buy shit from outbound outreach. Like, people, lots and lots and lots of teams generate significant percentages from buyers who weren't ready yet from outbound. So like, I think it's like I get the like point, but it's not true. Like, people are buying from these services. Like, so how can you say that like nobody who, just because I didn't fill out a form, and by the way, I'm more in your camp. I just want to be very clear. I'm more like over here with you. I'm not quite.
You're playing devil's advocate, yeah.
Well, no, I do think you're wrong about this, but like because I also agree that like a webinar attendee is, and you're reaching out to them, that's annoying. A email opener, that's annoying, right? Like those things. But someone who's visited 3 customer stories within a thing, and then attended a webinar on the same topic, like that is somebody who could, I'm not saying is, could like be like actively evaluating, right? Like, all like alternatives or opportunities, right? And again, and then you think about some of these other, and again, like third-party intent data, I'm not a big fan of either. But first-party intent data, I think is valuable. And we couple with other maybe like high-intent sites like a G2, like, I mean, people are still generating a lot of deals this way. So like, I guess it's like, how do you balance that? That it's like not everyone who ever buys, not even close to everyone who ever buys, was a hand raiser, right? A lot of times you might have seen an ad and that sparked something like, oh, actually, I wasn't thinking about that, but that maybe I do want a new TV. Like, how do you think about that? How do you think about the people that still are driving deals via outbound?
Yeah. And so the argument isn't that prospecting or sales development never generates leads or revenue. It can, and it does. The argument is that just because something or a marketing tactic can generate leads and revenue does not mean that you should do it. Does not mean that it's worthwhile or that even has positive ROI. And that you need to, and I outline this in the book, you need to take into account all the costs, direct and hidden, and the opportunity cost, and like everything we know about prospecting and all the stats. And I include a lot of data versus demand gen. And the fact is that like, you should not kind of prematurely annoy or push buyers into sales. Like, you let demand gen continue to do their thing and give buyers, educate buyers, influence buyers, make all these deposits so that these buyers make a withdrawal when they are ready. And so that produces quality leads, which gets basically garbage, right? There's a saying, garbage in, garbage out. So if you push premature buyers in, you get garbage out in sales, and you'll have sellers, which is the case today, who are most sellers are missing quota most of the time. And I think this is part of it. And if you ask a seller, like, what's the most key part of your success? Every sales leader knows, or every seller knows, it is a sufficient amount of quality leads, and they're not getting that today. And so, I think that it is unnecessary to do lead intent or to do lead scoring. And if you're doing proper demand gen, those buyers will come in and raise their hands. You'll have marketing and sales efficiency. And so that's
so you don't
one
believe
thing.
in any like account-based marketing. You're like, no, waste of time.
It's a buzzword that means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. So I'm not really sure what you mean by that.
I'll define it for you. So I would define, and again, like, here's the thing. There's a lot of, I agree, right? And so I don't want to, I'll define very specifically the type of account-based marketing that I'm thinking about, which is there's a group of people and companies that fit doing statistical analysis on my current customers. These people look like, and this is how you target marketing and demand gen too, the types of companies and the roles within that could be interested. So marketing is doing the demand gen things you talked about. And then maybe a seller then sees that Johnny Sue, engaged with this. They got a book that was marked for them that's like on the future of the topic or something like that. They say, hey, we've sent a couple of these things. I don't know if this is like very specific, but I saw that I heard you on this podcast talk about this. Is this like a good time, or happy to connect in the future? Like, the strategies of the coordination between customized play coordination that requires a custom human element with marketing. That's how I'll define ABM.
Yeah. So if you define it that way, I would say like that should just be within demand gen, where you have like a junior level marketer who's helping to as part of the content marketing and co-marketing efforts, that like they'll reach out to, influencers and prospects and customers, whatever, to co-create content. That's or invite them onto the podcast, or go guest podcast, or events and fireside chats and things like that, like almost like what we're doing now. And so you don't need sales development for that, and you don't want sales development for that. And so I would say that about ABM. Yeah.
So you just think Kim said this is like, do you think marketing is too big a department and should be broken down? It sounds like to me, basically anything that involves any type of outreach. And then again, like somebody else had asked on here about calls as well too. It sounds like you're just pulling it away from the, like let's call it like any of the email parts in particular, you're pulling that away to marketing. You're like looping that in with the call, like demand gen.
The fundamental purpose of sales development and prospecting is telemarketing, which is probably behind door knocking the worst marketing tactic that you can do. And I posted about this on LinkedIn today. Data from the best telemarketers in the business, using the best data and the best dialer, whatever, who made like over 1.5 million calls in the past year, and that got less than it was something like 0.5% of people who accepted a meeting, let alone. And I'm trying to find out like how many of those meetings actually held, and then how many of those meetings actually converted to opportunities, how many of those opportunities actually converted to closed won. What was the sales cycle? What was the win rate? What's the CAC? Cost of acquisition, or whatever. So, you don't need pay someone $100,000 to like kind of like a sales development person to do certain manual emails that marketing can do, like a demand gen specialist or marketing coordinator can do. That's not the fundamental purpose of the SDR role. The fundamental purpose of the SDR role is to basically be like a telemarketer plus some, to do other stuff in a high volume of basically what I would consider to be spam activities. The one other thing I wanted to mention regarding the history of prospecting. So prospecting was done by sales part-time in addition to their actual sales role. And sellers back then were AE CSM combined. And that was, it was so apparent that, prospecting plus the sales role could not be done together. Prospecting was too laborious. It was too fruitless. It has to be done constantly in large quantities, whatever. Sellers didn't want to do it, obviously. They couldn't, in addition to their sales role. And so the first specialization in sales role.
I did it for 5 years and ran a team of people that did it. I mean, it's totally the thing. It's totally doable, right? It's not the fun part of the job, right? But I think it's interesting how you think it's okay to decouple that, but yet it's not okay. But yet if I'm the person and I'm being thoughtful, I'm like, look, I want to get a meeting with Nelson. I think that it's a good fit around this. And I'm reaching out and saying, hey, I've seen these things. And then I'm also the person that hops on that call who's actually an expert on what I'm talking about. I mean, yeah, it works. It's good. It's a great customer experience versus somebody who doesn't know what they're talking about reaching out, or marketing just like spamming with a bunch of emails and banner ads.
Well, I would say neither of those are really good options. Like I don't really know what's worse, to have the SDR AE split, or to have I think, improperly considered a full sales cycle seller, which is an SDR AE or a partial marketer and a partial seller. I think that's a corruption of the full sales cycle term, which I'm trying to claim as an AE CSM combined, no prospecting. But I think it's very important to understand that the initial sales assembly line and sort of the history of how we got to where we are today was that sales couldn't do their sales job, or was not. It was so obvious that that was such a bad idea that the first sales specialization happened with the hunter farmer split, where they said, okay, let's split up the sales role, and we'll have one seller do prospecting in the initial sale. And so that was the SDR AE, and then we'll have another seller, the CSM, handle expansion retention. Even that was too much, and they still couldn't do prospecting. And so when in the late 90s, early 2000s, that's when sales development really kind of hit the scene. And they said, let's take prospecting fully off sales' plate because it's clearly very inefficient. Why would you want your sellers doing the worst kind of marketing? Sellers hate it. It needs to be done constantly, again, in large quantities.
That's not whatsoever. It, no, it was cheaper. That's not it. The reason that sales development came about was it was cheaper. And why specialization in any type of labor happens is that you're optimizing. And by the way, I'm not saying that this holds true today. I want to be very clear. But you're optimizing for a CAC target based on LTV, not the initial sale, and that it's more efficient when you have a person who's more junior that you pay less, who can fill up a pipeline, not because it was stupid. It was because it was more efficient. It was the CAC made the CAC numbers look better.
Yeah, no, I'm only, of course, it was a numbers thing and a profitability thing. But I'm also saying that it was such an undesirable part of the role that people didn't want to do it. And so there was reluctance on sellers to do that, obviously. And that's why it was very inefficient. And that's why it didn't really get done in the volume that it needed to get done in. Anyway, and so that was in the late 90s, late 2000s. And then you have sales development, and they still kept the AE CSM split. And then that's kind of where we still are today. And so, if you look at sales development today and they're struggling, you got something like 40% turnover. You've got, something like, it's your stat of your data set, something, 80% are missing quota. I mean, it depends on where you look, but it's like most of them are missing quota most of the time. Yep. You're going to see low tenure, something like 14 months. And I think dropping. It's very expensive. Like, it's time, capital, and labor intensive. An SDR can cost something like 100,000, 115,000. Plus you got management and leadership and the tools and the process and all the time and effort that kind of goes into it. And then when you factor in, that if you do a lot of this prospecting activities, you turn off a lot of buyers, and then you push some buyers prematurely to sales. So low quality leads for sale. We talked about that. And then you think about the opportunity cost of not investing in demand gen, given all the things that modern demand gen can do nowadays. And it's very important to observe that there's a movement within demand gen now to liberate itself from, they're arguing against the effects of sales development and prospecting, and not against its cause of sales development and prospecting, so that they're not being very successful in the fight, but they're trying to liberate themselves from the MQL hamster wheel. They're trying to liberate themselves from manual qualification and demo scheduling, just automate that on the website. They're trying to be the one to fully generate and qualify leads for sales, but they can't because they're handcuffed, crowded out by and counteracted by sales development. And so if you look at people like Chris Walker and the whole demand gen movement, what's going out, they're trying to do that, but they can't because we're still stuck in the straitjacket.
I mean, most of the companies Chris works with have outbound teams.
Yeah, well, most companies do, despite because most companies are still in this predictable revenue model where they think they have to have that. Even if they do have a very successful demand generation engine, it's like, well, revenue model says it's a good additional layer and it's a good addition to demand gen. And so let's do that. And a lot of people don't realize how harmful that is. And so what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to help people realize how harmful that is, calculate all the costs. And so in my book, I kind of outline how people can go in and compare sales development to demand gen and compare the leads from sales development to demand gen and the cost and the resources you put into both, to look into the CRM, to basically realize which side your bread is buttered on, and then propose a business case where you basically conduct two experiments. The first experiment, you automate inbound demo scheduling and qualification on the website. And the second experiment, you gradually reduce your prospecting activities by 25% increments. And then you measure again, and you do this over a sales cycle or two and whatnot. And then eventually you're able to see that like actually sales development is doing more harm than good, and we should be reinvesting our resources into demand gen. And then eventually you can fully, and then as you're kind of going through this trend, this sort of experiments, you're repurposing SDRs to do more fun and marketing, which they're anyways trying to do. But again, we talked about that. They prevent it from doing content, social, and all this other stuff. They'll be thrilled.
Why do you say that? They're totally not, though. I mean, there's so many SDR teams that are active, and not in a spammy, in-mail way, but in a active way, and sales reps that are active on LinkedIn who are talking about their industry and things that are happening. Like, I feel like your beef is really with like the send all appointment setting type of SDR versus the value add SDR. And I argue an SDR and everyone in the sales organization should be active on LinkedIn talking about, what happens. So I can't, it's like an oversimplification and generalization of what an SDR is based on the absolute worst case. It's like me saying that demand gen, like the Steve Cruz, like when's the last time you responded to a mass email? It's like me saying that demand gen is, it's all demand gen is bad emails and mass emails and one-to-one attribution and attempting to track. Like, it just feels like you're really like anchoring on like the worst case SDR. Well,
it's the incentives of the role. The role is designed to do that. And so the people, to the extent that they try and circumvent that, they do it despite the role.
No, not that's because they have activity. That's if people have activity minimums.
It's not just activity minimums. It's their short-term monthly meeting quota plus half of their compensation.
So tell me how that over time is a bad incentive. So tell me how. Okay, I'm supposed to reach out to people and set up meetings. Now, this idea is not the end of the world, because what is marketing? Like, you're just moving who's looking at the meetings getting set, whether it's this person or this person, and there's still going to be a number around people who did a booking on a website. Like, it just feels like you're just shifting, but they're doing the same thing.
Well, no, they do different tactics, and they've got actually different, you'd say different metrics and different compensation. So I think that the very nature of the SDR role is very different from demand gen across those things. And so when we talk about quota and commission, I consider quota to be an improper type of goal and performance measurement. It's typically a short-term production amount in a short amount of time, so monthly, whether that's meeting quotas or revenue quota. And it's often considered the only performance metric. So you don't look really at anything else. And so in the case of sales, you just look at revenue attainment. You don't look at sales cycle, win rate, churn, feedback from buyers, teamwork, professionalism. Like, if you're a full sales cycle seller, the way I look at it, you don't even look at contraction, expansion, nothing. It's just like you just look at revenue attainment, which we can talk about is size outside of the seller's control. It's only one part of a measurement. You need to look at the seller holistically. And then the other part of it is that it is related to commission, which I think is bad, but it's basically withholding half of a seller's compensation, or an SDR, half of their compensation pending their quota attainment, which we all know most of them are missing most of the time. And it's a stretch goal and all the other things. It's like, and so, but yeah, it's an outcome that's largely outside the control. So it's really undesirable. And I think it creates a lot of stress and unnecessary pressure and financial uncertainty to get people to be on this hamster wheel of spam.
And you're lumping everything into
short-term mindset.
Like, did you just lump? It's really easy. Like, you're just waving a wand and calling everything spam. Like, you're saying that all prospecting that SDRs do is spam, and it's just not true. That's like me saying all email newsletters and all email marketing is spam. Like, I feel like, again, it's like a generalization to fit your narrative.
Yeah, no, I hear what you're saying. And it's like, there are, to the extent that like SDRs do try and like break out of that, as I once said, was like, I'm trying to make this as least spammy as possible, or something like that. You're prohibited by the nature of the role to actually do that consistently, like all the time, given that type of stuff.
Only if you have activity metrics. If you do not have activity metrics, and instead you're empowered to be creative and engage and find ways to interact and engage with buyers who then raise their hand in one form or another, then it's not spam. I'm not poorly incentivized. I'm incentivized just like a demand gen person is, to try to get people to engage and raise their hand, whether it's they booked a link on a website or they sent me an email saying, yeah, I want to meet.
So can you give me an example, like a specific example of that? And then why should someone in sales development do that as opposed to someone in demand gen?
Well, I think it does it. I guess my point is, like, I feel it. Does it matter? We're talking about the same role here, right? All you're trying to do is just shift the role from SDR. I'm talking about the SDR role is as an evolution. And I agree that there is some of this like shift over. But what I would say is that marketing is typically focused on engaging a group of people, and some people one-to-one, but marketing in most cases is not about customization to the individual based on research and data that can't be scraped publicly necessarily. Some of it, sure, from the internet, to then do a customized interaction. And so that is where demand gen and 99.9% of demand gen can't do that. And I'm not advocating for more humans, but I am saying that the people that are doing this type of outreach are winning and doing very well. And demand gen can't replicate that in its current form. It cannot replicate like true customization or true relevancy. It's just too broad. It's too vague.
You can have marketing or demand gen or whatever you call it. They can do one-to-one, one-to-few, one-to-many, and demand gen can and should be doing that. And I'm saying that, like, if you're going to have an entry-level marketer to do one-to-one or like manual emails to say like, hey, Jake, you want to come on the pod, or hey, Jake, you want to come on the event, or, hey, Jake, you talk a lot about this in the biz, and like, we're, you interested in like chiming in on this type of stuff and co-creating some content or whatever. Then, you don't need SDRs for that. That's not the nature of the SDR role. It's like and so it's like, why would you have two different departments, demand gen and like sales development, when you can have like a normal marketer, marketing coordinator who's not saddled with quotas or commission and is paid properly and normally, and that they have like proper marketing goals. And it's not just like short-term monthly meeting. That's very different from demand gen, where demand gen, when you're looking at marketing metrics, you're looking at number of demo requests, you're looking at conversion rates and number of opportunities, cost per opportunity, revenue, sales cycle, win rate, cost per acquisition, payback period. You're looking at kind of like marketing efficiency throughout the funnel. So how are the marketing leads performing all the way to revenue? And you're trying to take a long-term horizon. You have like an annual, just like companies and other departments, you have an annual revenue goal, which you track
How
monthly
many people
and quarterly.
are doing this? Like I got it. Like, as you keep going down, like Ross, Alexander, a bunch of people are asking the same question. So it's like, and by the way, just because a bunch of people aren't doing it, I want to be very clear, doesn't mean that it's not right? Not necessarily, right? But what I would say is, like, where's your case? Where's the case study? Like, where's the data that shows outbound actually doesn't still generate a significant amount of revenue, and that inbound can generate 100% for hockey stick growth of a tech? Like, where's the like proof of this?
Yeah, so there's, in my book, I kind of go through a lot of the data, but like, not to bore everyone and like go be lengthy.
No,
about
I think
it,
people
want
like the data. I think
yeah,
like, I think
all I'm
people
saying
are,
is, like, I'll talk about some of it. Just like, if you want to kind of sit down and sift through a whole bunch of stuff, there's a lot more of it in the book. And I'm publishing an update, so there'll be even more. In general, it's really hard to get, there's not a lot of research on this type of stuff because people aren't doing this research. And so the data isn't publicly available to access. And so you get some data, like it's bits and pieces, like, because, and again, companies have mixture elements. They've got like elements of bad marketing sales and elements of good marketing sales. And I'm trying to challenge the bad elements and propose better elements. And so it's hard. And so people often lump them together and they don't separate out and compare them, which I'm trying to get them to do. And so I think this, a lot more evidence will kind of come across. And so, like, if looking at companies at your own company, you can actually see this for yourself at your own company, which I think is very important. And then using kind of snapshots of other companies, kind of like what they're doing and what they're saying, then you can kind of be able to like deduce, like, okay, yeah, actually this is very suboptimal. It's doing more harm than good or whatever. Let's reinvest elsewhere. And so, like, for example, off the top of my head, there was a study by, or research from Refine Labs across 30 SaaS companies, where comparing sales development or prospecting to demand generation, they saw, let me just pull up the numbers. That way I don't butcher this because I think this is important for people, just to kind of set the scene a little bit.
No, I think I know the report you're talking about. Or I know the post. I don't even know if it was like a full blown report, and they're doing a lot more of this like data readouts. It's not saying that demand gen isn't a better lead type. I don't think anyone's arguing that. It's that demand gen requires someone to get to such a level of intent where the reality is that there are people that are in the middle, the high middle, not the low, not the I attended a webinar, there are people that are almost there that, and again, to your point, whether it's I think it's like it's provocative to say death of an SDR. The reality is you're just advocating that the evolution of the SDR is junior marketing people doing customized things.
You could say some of the things
not
that
getting
SDRs
quota. Actually, I want to do that because we only got 10 minutes left.
Tell
me about the quota stuff. I want to hear about this. You're telling me most marketing teams shouldn't have a revenue quota, or marketing teams shouldn't have a revenue contribution quota?
No. But let me before I no, I'm saying your formulation of my position is mistaken. I'll clarify that in just a second. But let me just touch upon that study, just so people, to plant the seed for people, and they should go take a look at this. And I outline this in the book. So from Refine Labs, data across 30 SaaS companies, prospecting versus demand gen, or sales development versus demand gen. Prospecting 5 times higher cost per acquisition, a 3 to 5 year CAC payback versus 9 to 12 months for demand gen, and a lower sales win rate of 2 to 10% versus demand gen's 20, 30%. So if you were to think about what that means for sales would need 10 to 50 demos from prospecting to win 1 deal versus 3 to 5 demos from demand gen. So that's one example data subset. I'm hoping we'll get more data. Anyway, but as far as quota is concerned, so my contention is that for marketing, you've got those market metrics I mentioned. For sales, when you are measuring the performance of a seller, especially a real full sales cycle seller of the full sales cycle, initial sale, expansion, retention, you're looking not only at revenue attainment, which again is another way of saying that is the buyer's decision to purchase, which is sized outside the seller's influence and control. In fact, you could probably argue that product and marketing have more influence on that than the seller.
Wow. I just can't. No, I can't.
But
I can't just let you say that. What's the point of calling it sales? Then it's just information giving.
Well,
it's just today, you are saying that the job of sales. And by the way, I think we've shifted there more and more as buyers come in with more intent. But to say that literally the way that you're describing it is that nope, there's no influence, there's no anything that anyone can do to pick this product over this product. The buyer's going to make their decision no matter what. It's just straight.
Well, I'm not saying that.
True.
Just to clarify, it's not that there's no influence. What I'm saying is revenue cannot be the only metric that you use, to measure sales performance. You also have to look at other metrics holistically. So it's like win rate and sales cycle, product expertise. It's like when a manager is evaluating the performance of their people, like in any other department, they're looking at someone holistically across a whole bunch of stuff. But you're looking at just revenue attainment, which can be very misleading when you look at a seller, because you can have a seller that has more revenue attainment than another seller, but one seller is actually better than the other. And so maybe that seller had some leads that were good for marketing that were and these buyers bought despite the seller. The seller was lousy, but the buyers bought despite the seller because the product, whatever, or the marketing was really good.
Yeah,
or the opposite. Yeah, or the opposite. So it's the seller did everything right, but the buyer didn't buy because they can and should. So all I'm saying is that revenue is one component of measuring a seller, but quota says, no, that's going to be the only thing that we look at. Plus, we're going to withhold 50% of the compensation the seller through or their half their salary through their attainment of that. And so I go into detail in the book about commission. I think there's a lot of misunderstanding about the nature of commission, and I think it really harms sellers, that it's a really lousy form of compensation. And it's not about that some sellers some of the time make because what a commission essentially is, or the commission model today is, you've got 50% base, 50% commission. So in other words, half your salary is upfront guaranteed, and the other half is pending.
And the OTE combined is higher than 90% of everyone else in the other organization.
Where
in an enterprise sales rep, a VP of sales. So the comp, there's a reason why. If the job is simply information giving, Nelson, why is there why I have a bonus? It's cool. You'll make $70,000 a year. your whole job is someone comes in, you give them the facts, you tell them great, and then I manage them and I service them. And if they want to churn, they'll churn. If they don't, like why would I pay anybody? Like what's the point of commission? Like if
the real purpose
paying
of
people
commission,
a higher level.
Yeah, because there's the other aspect of commission is that if you actually exceed your quota, then there's some probability or some small probability that you will have uncapped or make more than your full salary would have been. And my contention again is to have full OTE salary plus a bonus. But yeah, the whole purpose of quota and commission, the real true intended purpose is not for the seller's best interest, I think, or the buyer's best interest, if you ask buyers. Or even in the company, and I outline this, it's a lose for everyone, but it is intended to pressure the seller, to pressure the buyer, and create sort of stress and desperation in the seller to do so. And I also think while actually giving a seller lousy compensation, so it's more than just the total raw amount of dollars. There's a lot of issues in commission that people need to factor in, just like when they factor in prospecting. There's a lot of different negatives and downsides that people don't think about when commission. They're just looking at what's the number of my W-2, despite all these other downsides that you need to be considering when you think about commission, and why other departments wouldn't want commission, and you know why commission is actually I think a lousy aspect of the sales role. But a lot of sellers are kind of taught to that they should want commission, and I think that's quite false. And so if you look at companies that have gone rid of commission and are seeing the light, and I talk about these in my book, Bamboo HR, Microchip Technology, Culture Amp, Pluralsight, Monday.com, Backblaze, etc. Like these are forward-thinking sales leaders who want to elevate and professionalize the sales profession and give their sellers proper compensation, and are seeing great benefits from that. The buyers are seeing great benefits for them. The companies are seeing great benefits from that, because you don't have to deal with all these complicated, commission structures and recalculating all that type of stuff, and commission payments and commission software and all this stuff, and it's variable payroll. So it's like it's a whole mess. And for sellers, I mean, talk about predictable revenue. It's not predictable revenue. You have half of your compensation, you have no idea if, when, and how much you're going to get. And it's really bad for budgeting and stuff like that. And especially if you've got a mortgage, a family, and kids, and like the older you are, the more financial responsibilities you have, to have that type of financial compensation and uncertainty. And so given the fact that most sellers are also missing their quota most of the time, that doesn't really pan out for a lot of their commission. And so I kind of go into detail about that, but I think that there's a lot of stuff that people aren't aware of. And so I spend a lot of time on that. And I personally have kind of been through that. I think a lot of people have had commission stories, and it's not just like some people, they're doing it wrong. I think it's just in general, it's like some people are doing it less wrong than others or whatnot. But in general, I think as a principle, it's a really lousy form of sales compensation.
Yeah. I mean, look, I just feel like when you compare everything to the worst instance, it makes your argument sound perfect. The reality is the other reason that people go into sales is because again, you're saying that that you don't actually have the ability to impact this, because again, over and over, you said the things that they can't control. And there are variables, of course, you can't control, but maybe you can control 20% of it, 30% of it. And why so many people go into sales is to the ability to make more money. Hey, if I want to put in the extra effort, if I want to put in the above and beyond, I can go and make extra money. Right?
Let's leave aside the nature of like a compensation structure, whether it's good or bad. You should never take a job just for money. And obviously that's not the only reason that a salesperson should get that.
No, of course not. That's not what I'm saying either. But I'm saying there are people that like, hey, I'm motivated to go and do that. Like I've got two kids and whatever, and I can do that to help my position. And I can put in more and more and more effort if I choose to. I don't have to.
So you would probably want the compensation structure that everyone else in a 9-to-5 job would want to get when you go to work for someone else. It is your salary plus a bonus, and the most salary that you can get, because that is good money that you can then put in the bank, and it's predictable money that you then reinvest and put elsewhere, and not actually the commission.
No,
so I think that's
not what I'd want. No, that's not what I'd want. I would not want that. I would instead want a plan where I knew the direct output from my results could drive more and more and more, not that it's fixed at 20% of my base salary.
Yeah. And so what I'm saying is, and what a commission really is, and if you look at the averages in B2B, it's basically the average is 62,000 base salary and 62,000 commission for a total OTE of about roughly 120. And again, don't get fooled. Commission is really half the cake. a bonus is icing on the cake. And so I'm saying full OTE salary plus a bonus. And the bonus is that like extra bit that you get for your, the bonus can be an individual component, a team component, a company component, all combined, or just an individual component. But the bonus is the icing on the cake. And so if you are someone who, I think it's like the same reason that's like, I can go and play those slot machines and I potentially can go make a lot of money or play the lotto, but that's not how I think about my money, or it's not how I invest my money in stocks. Like I'm not trying to go and like chase speculative bubbles. Like I'm looking for the good predictable revenue. I'm trying to, and so I don't think it's a very smart form of compensation for sellers. And I understand it's like that there's some aspect of the carrot that people, I think is and I think it's very misunderstanding and very, that's part of the allure of it. But I think that it's when you kind of properly understand it, you realize that it's a false carrot.
I mean, it's again, you're oversimplifying. Look, we got to wrap up. But like, I think it was a good conversation. I know people enjoyed it. I think that what you've done is simplified the worst case scenario of everything about sales to fit the narrative. And like, I get your points, but like a bonus is another form of getting people to do a certain type of behavior based on the bonus, the same way a commission is. There's stress to make sure you show up to work on time, to make sure you do this, to make sure you do this. So then you get paid 100% of your bonus. Like it doesn't go away. You're just shifting. You're shifting what people are doing in SDR that's amazing and killing it and just calling it demand gen. You're shifting what people call bonus from commission, and it just doesn't fit, dude. If you realize, if you play this back, you're literally describing incentivizing behaviors on either piece of it. And I'll let you respond to that, but like, it just does, it doesn't play.
Yeah, I think, and why, like in my book, why it seems like it's hard for people, and it was hard for me, it's because it's like the terms of the language that we use, or the concepts that we have that we're familiar with, it's like, whoa, this is out of left field. It's like, it's making me rethink or how I think about these things. And I think that's part of it.
No,
and
it's not it. No, you don't get to pawn off what I'm saying on like, I'm not enlightened yet. Like, no. I get it. I'm just saying, I'm trying to say that again, you are just shifting. I'm not enlightened and like, oh, I will see the light someday, Nelson. I'm telling you that like you're literally saying we should pay people their thing plus a bonus, which a bonus is based on behavior.
I'm not saying that not to pay people to motivate behavior. I'm saying that like there's a very big difference between the nature of bonus and commission. And so it's not the same thing. And it's not an equivocation. And so I think that's when I say, like, when you look at the book, it's like, I try to like kind of, these are commonly held notions like quota, commission, sales assembly line, prospecting. I can understand that it's sort of like, it's very much out of left field. So it's like, if you don't understand, if it's like very hard to grasp, or it's like very conflicting or something like that, like it should be, it took me a lot of time to kind of like wrap my head around this type of stuff. So all I'm saying is that like, if it sounds confusing or whatever, then that's probably it should be. But I think
don't sound again, like, it's all good, dude. I think on this point, we're going to wrap, because I can just tell it's like, it's a wall. It's like, it's not that it's confusing. I completely am very clear about what you're articulating. But what I'm saying is that the premise is based on like the worst of the worst cases. And even not how people are managing teams today, not how teams are managing SDR teams today, not how forward-thinking leaders are even thinking about the combination of commission and bonus, right? And I'm all for like, like some of the ideas around like, it should be a family of activities. Potentially, like there's some pieces there, but it's not about being enlightened around this, But again, I really think that people are getting a lot out of it. So like the good part is the comments are strong, and I get it, man. And I dropped the point in the book. I dropped the book so people can go check out the book. I dropped the link to your LinkedIn, so go check out what Nelson's putting down, because I do think it's important. What I do appreciate, Nelson, just to be clear, is I appreciate different points of view, because without like different points and conflicting points of view where we might not see eye to eye, we don't move things forward. And a lot of the things you say, I really do agree with. And I do agree that we need to have a major shift in marketing around how we're looking about what the job of marketing is. And I think you're trying to pull it more, trying to demand gen, and sales, which is some of the things that we're doing that may just not fit anymore. And I totally agree with that there's a lot of things that we're doing, like You know, if you said death of inbound SDR, I'd be like, yes, 100%. But the full, I'm not there yet. So maybe I just got to read the book and then I'll be enlightened.
Yeah, cheers. And and thank you so much, Jake, and everyone for tuning in and for the great discussion and the back and forth and the pushback and everything like that. And, you know, so hopefully hope to pick this up maybe again in the future. We'll have further conversations. This will be more conversations in the community. I hope people who are listening in chime in and weigh in, because these are discussions that really ought to be had, I think, and out there in the open, because it's kind of happening right now, a little bit backdoor, but I want you know, this stuff to be out there in the front so we can all kind of get closer to the truth.
I agree, man. Well, Nelson, thank you, man. I really appreciate you joining. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. It's always good to have a great discussion here, get people thinking outside the box, and thinking about the future. Whether you agree with me, you agree with Nelson, it's about how can we make things better. So, Nelson, I appreciate it, man.
Thanks. See you, Jake. Bye.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of your week.